Hello, my name's Danny from CG Dreams. Today we are in Cinema 4D and we're looking at V-Ray for Cinema 4D version 3.4, and the subject today is about compositing within Photoshop by using the multipass rendering features of Cinema 4D with V-Ray. So first of all, I'm going to get into just the basic settings that you're going to need to have to set up. And the first thing is we go into our render settings, we obviously have to make sure that we've got our V-Ray bridge selected, and we have to go into the multipass and turn it on. In the multipass we need to select from the multipass menu post effects. That's all we have to do for this. Now there's a couple of choices that we have to make at the beginning stages before we hit the render button, and that is, the first thing is do we want to go with 8, 16 or 32-bit. If we want to go to 32-bit and we want to use the V-Ray buffer, then we have to make a few choices right here and now, because it will make a difference between whether it works or it doesn't work. So just for those of you that are not familiar with V-Ray, the V-Ray bridge here allows you to select what's called a V-Ray frame buffer. And basically it's like the picture viewer that's for Cinema 4D, but it's V-Ray's own, and it's got some nice features for this. And out of this we can actually save our rendered multipassed stages from here. Now to do this in 32-bit, there's a couple of things we have to make sure that we've got set up, and that's done in both V-Ray and Cinema 4D. So for 32-bit, you have to make sure that in the save settings, even though this is for the V-Ray renderer, it does actually pass this information through to V-Ray, and that is for the regular image. We have to make sure that it's set to 32-bit. This is so the next setting I'm going to show you in V-Ray bridge within the color mapping, and you should be able to see this. If you're not, have a look and to see whether you're in expert mode, and that's when it should definitely be showing up. By default we've got this mode set to auto. Now when it's set to auto and we've got the save set to 32-bit, what it will do is it will tell V-Ray to, in the auto mode this is, to go ahead and apply color mapping only. In other words, it's not going to apply the 2.2 gamma that we've got set here. And for compositing we do not want the gamma to be applied. Absolutely not. Because each layer is going to have gamma applied and it's going to add up to a completely washed out image, and we definitely don't want that to happen. We don't want that to be the case. So now that we've set those couple of those things up, the next thing is we want to obviously set our scene up. So let me just show you what I've chosen for my scene. For the scene I've chosen to go with 3 cubes. And there's different attributes to these cubes that I wanted to basically use to show you the multi-layer rendering. So this one here is just one solid cube with some reflection on it. This one here is obviously a kind of glass material with refraction on it. This one here is another reflective cube, but it's actually got 2 materials applied to it. I'm going to show you how we can separate all of these elements. And of course we've got the background and we've got the floor. So there's several things that we need to take into consideration before we kind of go ahead and set the layering up, also the multipass. The first thing is we need to get our V-Ray multipass manager up, and the second thing is we need to know what it is we've got to actually include. And to do this, well, I've already given you a hint of what we've got to include, but if you go into the materials, you should see. Now if we look down here, we can see out of all of these attributes, we've just got 2 things. We've got the diffuse and the specular layer. Now we don't have to add a diffuse layer for the multipass, because all of the layers actually add up to give you the final diffuse color. So it's all combined with all of them. So in that case, the main thing in here is specular, or reflection in this particular case. Okay, as for that, exactly the same for the next material. In fact, for the next couple of materials when it comes to the color. Well, when it comes to this one here, the glass type material, we've got some different properties. We've got the specular, which has obviously got reflection in it. and we've got refraction. So we have to make sure that we've got reflection and refraction and even specular if it uses specular. Okay, yeah. Okay, so how do we add this to our multipass manager? Well, it's quite simple. All we have to do is we have to go to the top here, which is render elements, and we go into standard, and this is where we start to add them. Well, we know we're definitely going to need some reflection. We're going to need refraction for the glass. We're going to need specular, possibly. We're definitely going to need lighting. And we're going to need global illumination because I will have that turned on. We've got no caustics. If we did have, we would have to turn that on as well. But we've got a few things there that are basically the essentials that we need. Global illumination, lighting, specular, refraction and reflection. These ones are essential. Okay. Now with these added, there's a few other things that I want to do for our multipass. Not just have these different elements, but have the ability to use alphas to basically mask out different elements of our rendering scene. So for that purpose, as you can see, I'm just going to activate my IPR so we can see it in real time here. As you can see, we've got this yellow material applied and the red material applied to one object. So I want to be able to control them separate in our compositing. So to do that, what we have to do is we have to set up something in the material. Now the material for the red, I'm going to give it a material ID, and you can see just down here, I'll give it an ID of 1. I'm going to give the yellow an ID of 2. And the blue an ID of 3. Okay. So we started with a red, I believe. Yeah, red, yellow, and then blue. Now to add these, we go into the render element, and we go to multi-channels. And if you're just adding one, for instance, one material select, you select this one here. If you're adding multiple, you can go to multiple material select, and then we can put in how many we want. We want 3. Good idea to name these. Red, green, blue. For the red, the material ID was 1. And actually, I think we didn't go for a green, we went for a yellow, didn't we? Yellow was 2 and blue was 3. Okay, that's good. What about the whole object? What about to select the whole object and mask it out from the background? Well, we can do that as well. To do that, we have a slightly different process for this. We have to select the object first of all. So let's go for this object to start with, this one here. I'm going to make it so this is the only one I'm going to mask out in this case, just to keep things simple. We just right click, we go to the Vray tags and then compositing, and I'm going to give it a compositing tag of let's go for 4, shall we? And in here we go to our render elements, our multi-channels, and we've got object select. If I have multiple objects, I will go to multiple object select, but I haven't. So we're going to go for that, and we're going to just type this in blue box. We know which one then. I believe I'll give this, was it 4? Should show it up in here once we put it in there. There we go. It's quite handy to show it inside the tag itself. And that is it. We are pretty much ready to go. Next thing is I'm just going to check in the Vray settings that I've got my global illumination on, which I have. Into the options, I make sure that I've got show Vray frame buffer window, and then we will hit render. It shouldn't take too long to render this. And you notice that it's looking quite dull. This is because of the options that we've chosen. We've chosen to go to the auto mode for the color mapping. I'll just show you where this is again. So we're in the color mapping, we're in auto mode, and that auto mode has chosen to only render the color mapping information into the render, not the lighting information, which is the gamma. So we've got this button here to make up for this, and it says basically display in Rgb Space, and that looks more like it should be, and it's only for the display purposes. It's not going to embed that into the render because we don't want that to happen. That's very, very important. If we were to see this like this and we didn't have to press that RGB button and we were exporting 32-bit images, then basically we would have a gamma of 2.2 being embedded into each of those layers, and that all adds up to a very blown up image. So now that we've got this, the next stage is to go and save it. So I'm going to go up to here and I'm going to select save all image channels to separate files. We want to select the EXR format and then save it out. Next thing is I'm going to pop into Photoshop. We go to File, we go to Scripts, and we go to Load Files into Image Stack, and we'll just browse to where our files is and then bring them in. Oops, I accidentally copied them. Right, we'll select all of them, and bring them in. Right, so first off, this diffuse alpha, we can turn this off. The top one here that you can see, it says boxes diffuse. I just want to grab the one that just says boxes. I think we actually called them all boxes diffuse. That's not very helpful, is it? Okay, so this one here, take no notice of the name that's in here because it's something that I shouldn't have named that way. It's the second name here, GI, lighting, multi, matte, and so forth. That's the one we need to be looking at. The top one here is showing you basically what the render should look like when we've composited everything together. We turn this off, we've got no compositing laid down basically at the moment. So there's a couple of things I need to turn off. It's the multi-matte, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about the multi-matte in a minute. I'm going to put this to the top and turn this off. What we should have left is our GI, lighting, reflection, refraction, and specular. And we turn each of these on to be linear dodge add. And okay. So once we've got the linear dodge add turned on for all of these, it should make up to look like it did in the first place, all but the background. Now we haven't got the background because we didn't actually add that in there. So we just go back in there. We go back to our multipass in our standard channels, and we should have one in there called background. There it is. Done. Now you notice in Photoshop, even though it's composited it together correctly, we've only got one multi-matte in here, and that was for one object. The other ones seem to be gone, and this is something that is just an issue at the moment with V-Ray. I'm sure it's going to get sorted out soon. So in this particular case, you'd have to go in there and manually export this. So we've got our multi-matte. We should have a few in there. That's the one we've already got. We've got one for the yellow color, so we can save this out. Call this yellow alpha. Red. that one there. Seem to have added it twice for some reason. Everything else is there and good. And that is how we set it up for exporting 32-bit. But what about if we want to export it as 8-bit or 16-bit? Well, for that, I would avoid using the Vray frame buffer, because for some reason it doesn't seem to have the option to export 8 or 16-bit. And because it doesn't, what it ends up doing is it ends up basically not allowing you to produce the right type of file. It just simply won't work. In other words, 8 or 16-bit mode, when you've got it saved in here, 8 or 16-bit, what tends to happen is it will still go to Vray Bridge, and in auto mode it will still choose color mapping only, which is no good for 8 or 16-bit. Color mapping in gamma, no good for 8 or 16-bit when you're using multi-layers. This is I'm talking about. None, different story. You can export things with that, but to be quite honest with you, by that point you may want to just use the picture viewer, because in my experience the picture viewer automates things a lot more easier, and I will show you that in a minute. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go for an 8-bit export. Okay, you wouldn't really want to go for 8-bit normally. 16-bit would be the next sort of step up from the 32, or down from the 32. 8-bit, yeah, it's debatable, but we'll go for the 8-bit, but make sure the mode is turned to none. Okay, it's the only way you're going to get an 8-bit out of there. It can still cause problems, and let's just go for it now. Now, right now, we should not have to have the sRgb turned on, because we're going for an 8-bit export, and this is where the problems start. You can see here we've got it set to none. The output is for 16-bit. Try 8-bit. It makes no difference. This will not export as an 8-bit for multipass at all. It will not work. I've tried it over and over again, because essentially it's embedding a profile, the RGB profile, that is, and that's not good for us. What we want it to do is basically embed just the gamma for the 8-bit. So I'm going to abort this. It's absolutely pointless going any further with this. Let's move on to using the picture viewer. So for the picture viewer, which in my opinion is a lot more easier because it sets everything up for you, the picture viewer, we need to go to Vray options and turn off the show Vray frame buffer, and then for the picture viewer it's already set up. Whatever we have in there is what it's going to do for us. So as an example, I'm going to go for a 32-bit. We could automatically save it, set it so it saves it already out automatically. That's something that we can do, or we can just save it afterwards. We've got the choice. It doesn't really matter. The good thing is I'll show you right now. I'm just going to hit render. That's rendering out. We go to our layer, and what we've got the ability to do in the picture viewer is select single pass, and then we're able to actually go for each of the single passes to see what makes up the whole image. And you can see there, that's quite nice. But also we can go into multipass while it's rendering and just take off some of these elements just to see what they're doing. You can see here that it's actually kept the naming convention as well, which is really, really nice. It's allowed us to basically composite within Cinema 4D. It's done it already. If you notice, when you select each of these, you see the mode is set to add. It's already done. Everything's already done for us. So we'll just we'll turn off that one. I'm going to save it right now. Another feature which is better in Cinema 4D's native output is the fact that you can turn on layers. You can save it as a Photoshop file, 32-bit layers, and then when you export this, it exports as one single file. Then when we go into Photoshop, we just simply open that up. No image stacks or anything like that. When it comes to here, we want to leave it where it is. Use embedded profile instead of working space. Then we just turn on a couple of these elements that we won't need right now. So this red, yellow and blue, these are masks. And is there anything else in there that needs to go off? Oh, the blue box, there we go. So these are all masks. Just going to group them, call them alphas for now and put them out of the way. There we go, we got our composite just like that. It's that easy, and we can obviously turn off the different elements in there. We turn off refraction, you can see what happens. In this case, specular wasn't playing a role because we got reflection on there. Lighting was definitely playing a role, but at least we can go in there now and we can start to work on it. And this is 32-bit. Now here's the thing with Cinema 4D's native export, is you can simply go in here. You've already got it rendered out, you don't have to render it again. You can simply go in here and choose 16-bit layers. You can save an 8-bit version out. And now when you go into Photoshop, you can open these up. And there we go, we've got the composite. The difference is now we're working in 16-bit. If you wanted to convert your 32-bit to 16-bit, you may run into a few problems. So for instance, if you go into mode and you wanted to change it to 16-bit and we don't want to merge anything, this is what you're going to get. Whereas at least you only have to render it once with the picture viewer. You can export it at 16-bit, 18-bit, and it will always add up correctly and look correctly. It's not unfortunately the case with Vray. You go, this is the 8-bit version. You see that 8-bit, 32-bit, 16-bit and 8-bit. You can't simply do that within Vray. With Vray you have to make sure that you change these settings before you do the render, because it will dictate what mode it's going to select in the color mapping. And in all of these cases, none of them are suitable for 8 or 16-bit for multipass. In addition to that, as I said, there is a problem with Vray at the moment where we're not for Vray directly, well it is, but it's in the frame buffer. That's where the problem is. When you want to export multi-images, it never keeps more than one of these map materials, and of course you can see here that we've lost our naming convention that we set up. They're just called multi-mat. At least with the picture viewer, it does actually keep the name convention. The only downside to that is the fact that you're going to lose some of your features in here. You're going to lose some control that you have, for instance the post effects like bloom, and you're going to lose the ability to apply these filters. And of course your denoiser, which is a very nice one to have. You know, if you're working on a noisy scene, the denoiser, you'll be losing it by using the picture viewer. So you have to sort of work out the trade-off between that. But that is basically it. If you wanted to go simple and use 8, 16, 32-bit use the picture viewer to export. It's going to save you a bit of trouble free exporting if you do it that way. If you want to go 32-bit, you have to make sure you've got the save mode on in 32-bit, and make sure in the V-Ray bridge it's set to auto or it's set to color mapping. Leaving it auto essentially automatically puts it to color mapping all the time you've got your save to 32-bit. But as I said, you will have a couple of extra things to do. So what about in Photoshop? What can we do in Photoshop? There's a few things that we can do in Photoshop that are quite helpful, but that's for another video. In another video I want to show you in ways you can use these compositing tags, how you would select them, how you would apply them, and use them for different effects. Until then, bye for now.